2,000 years ago, before inhalers, before antibiotics, before hospitals, a bad cough could turn deadly. And when the chest grew tight, when the breath came hard, when the nights were spent struggling for air, this was what people reached for. Not a rare herb from a distant mountain, a tall, fuzzy weed growing right beside the road. If you have ever driven past an empty field or a gravel roadside, there is a good chance you have already passed this plant dozens of times without ever realizing it. It stands tall, sometimes taller than a person, with a single spike of soft yellow flowers and large, pale, velvety leaves that feel almost like felt between your fingers. Most people, if they notice it at all, call it a weed. But for more than 2,000 years, across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, healers reached for this exact plant for one purpose above all others: to help people breathe. This is the story of Mullein, a common roadside plant with an ancient reputation and a growing file of modern scientific interest. This is educational content, not medical advice. Always talk to a qualified healthcare professional before using any herb, especially for anything involving your lungs or breathing. Welcome to the Green Domain, where ancient wisdom meets modern science. Let us begin. First, let us meet the plant properly, because once you learn to see it, you will notice it everywhere. Mullein is a tall, upright plant that often grows in poor, disturbed soil, exactly the kind of ground most plants avoid. Roadsides, gravel, old fields, waste ground. In its first year, it forms only a low rosette of those soft, silvery green leaves. In its second year, it sends up a single dramatic spike, sometimes 2 meters tall, covered in small yellow flowers. Its leaves are large, pale, and covered in fine, soft hairs, which is why one of its old country names was simply flannel leaf. People also called it lungwort, Aaron's rod, and candlewick plant, because the dried stalks, once dipped in fat or wax, were actually burned as torches in the ancient world. But it was the connection to the lungs that made Mullein truly important. Now, let us go back in time, because the history here is remarkably consistent. The ancient Greek physicians were among the first to write Mullein down. Dioscorides, one of the most important physicians of the ancient world, recommended Mullein nearly 2,000 years ago, specifically for conditions of the chest and lungs. That is a striking starting point, because it set a pattern that would repeat across cultures for the next 2,000 years. In traditional European folk medicine, mullein leaves and flowers were brewed into teas and prepared as remedies for coughs, for bronchitis, and for the tightness and irritation of respiratory illness. When European settlers carried the plant to the Americas, something fascinating happened. Native American peoples, encountering this new arrival, adopted it quickly and independently arrived at the same core use. Several indigenous nations used mullein for coughs and lung complaints, and some even dried and smoked the leaves, inhaling the smoke in an attempt to ease congestion and soothe irritated airways. Now, stop and think about what that actually means. A Greek physician writing on a scroll 2,000 years ago, a village healer in medieval Europe, a Native American elder on a different continent entirely who had never heard a word of Greek and never read a single European text. 3 worlds, separated by oceans, separated by thousands of years, with no way to share what they knew, and all of them, independently, looked at this same fuzzy roadside plant and reached the same conclusion. This one helps the lungs. When completely separate cultures, who never spoke to one another, arrive at the exact same answer, that is not superstition. That is the closest thing history gives us to a natural experiment, and it is exactly the signal that tells modern scientists a plant is worth a very close look. So, what does happen when scientists actually study mullein? Here, as always on this channel, we are going to be honest, because mullein is a genuinely interesting case, but it is not a miracle, and anyone who tells you otherwise is overselling it. When researchers examine mullein, they find that the plant contains several classes of active compounds, including saponins, flavonoids, and mucilage. Each of these helps explain the traditional use. First, the mucilage. Picture warm tea coating a raw, scratchy throat like a soft protective blanket, soothing the irritation. That soothing feeling is the mucilage at work, a gel-like substance that turns slippery in water. It is very likely why a warm cup of Mullein tea was reached for across so many centuries. Then, the saponins. Think of that deep, rattling, heavy chest that will not clear. The saponins have traditionally been linked to helping loosen and bring up mucus, which fits Mullein's old reputation as a remedy for exactly that congested, heavy chest. And laboratory studies have found that Mullein extracts show antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial activity, and some early research has even looked at the plant against certain respiratory viruses and bacteria in the laboratory. But here is the honest limit, and it matters. Most of this research is still early. It is largely laboratory work and traditional evidence, not large human clinical trials. The science has not yet caught up to the full weight of Mullein's ancient reputation. What we can fairly say is this: the plant contains real active compounds. Those compounds plausibly explain why so many cultures used it to soothe the airways. And modern researchers consider it a legitimate subject of study, not folklore to be dismissed. That is a measured claim. And it is a fair one. There is one more part of the Mullein story worth telling, because it is where caution becomes important. Because Mullein is so common and its reputation so old, people sometimes assume it must be completely harmless. But even a gentle plant deserves respect. The fine hairs on the leaves can irritate the throat if not properly filtered, which is why Mullein tea was traditionally strained carefully through cloth. The seeds of the plant contain compounds that are not meant to be consumed. And, most importantly, anyone with a genuine respiratory condition, like asthma or a chronic lung disease, should never replace their real medicine with a folk remedy and should always speak to a doctor. Mullein is a fascinating plant. It is not a substitute for medical care. So, let us step back and look at the whole picture. Here is a plant that grows, ignored and unloved, in the poorest soil, along the roads we drive and the lots we pass every day. A plant most people would call a weed and pull without a thought. And yet, for over 2,000 years, Greek physicians, European healers, and Native American nations all looked at this same plant and saw the same thing: a remedy for the breath, a helper for the lungs. Modern science now confirms that the plant contains real compounds that plausibly explain that ancient, shared reputation, even as researchers continue the work of fully understanding it. This is exactly why we explore the ancient pharmacy. Not because old remedies are magic, but because, hidden in plain sight, sometimes growing right at the edge of the road, there are plants that generations of healers understood long before we had the tools to explain why. The next time you pass a tall spike of soft yellow flowers standing in a forgotten patch of ground, you will know. Sometimes the world's oldest medicines are not hidden deep inside a rainforest or locked away in some distant mountain. Sometimes they are growing right beside the road, quietly waiting for someone to finally recognize them. That is Mullein, one of the oldest lung remedies in human history, hiding in plain sight. If you enjoyed this kind of single plant story, told honestly, let me know in the comments, and subscribe to the Green Domain, because there are many more of these hidden plants still to uncover. Ancient wisdom, modern proof, real results. I will see you in the next one.